Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight. I'm going to be joined in the next segment with Gerald Celente. And one of the things I want to talk to him about is, of course, economic trends. He covers trends in a wide variety of areas. Before I get to that, though, there's some breaking news that's up on Infowars.com from Jonathan Oosting. NRA celebrates new Michigan laws exempting gun records from public disclosure. Now, the interesting thing about this is that when you compare it to the other article that's another article up on Infowars.com from Mikhail Phelan, where the SWAT team in Massachusetts is refusing a Freedom of Information request from the ACLU saying, we're a private organization. We're not going to give you any statistics about what we do or how often we do it, and totally closing them off. And to which the ACLU said, well, if you are truly a private organization, then you're breaking the law. But contrast that to what was going on in Michigan. You had people in Michigan, this law in Michigan, as well as a response to what was going on in New York as well, where people were using Freedom of Information requests to get information about individual gun owners. That's not what FOIA was about. FOIA was there to give us transparency and insight into what our government is doing, not to let us spy on our neighbors. So they're celebrating the fact that they now have a new Michigan law that will protect gun records. These are private records. They should not be subject to FOIA requests. There's no reason for the public to have that information. If you look at that article, there's a great picture on there of a gun done by somebody named Travis Knight, my son. I think it's a great picture. Now, Gerald is going to be joining us in just a little bit, Gerald Celente. And, of course, yesterday we had some economic revision. You know, they love to revise these economic numbers as they go along. They give us one number, and then the next quarter they say, well, you know, it was actually worse than we thought, but now it's improving. Well, this was a major revision. An article that's up on Infowars.com says the U.S. economy has collapsed. This is a monstrous negative revision. We're not talking about a recession. We're talking about a collapse, and that's by Max Slavo. Now, other people have reported on this. We've got Market Watch saying the economy stumbles and a first quarter historic fall. They say the 2.9% drop in GDP is the biggest during economic expansion since World War II. That kind of puts it in perspective. We see another one here from Bloomberg. They say, well, it's the most in 5 years. You know, you can pick your points to try to make it read any way you want to. But then, of course, Obama wants it to look as though it's anybody's fault but his own. And this is an article from thefederalist.com. They say the economy tanked last quarter and it's everybody's fault but Obama. And they point out how the liberal organizations like Think Progress and, of course, Huffington Post will come in and say, hey, it was good that things didn't fall as much as we thought because, and one of the reasons is because healthcare spending is on the rise. That's a good thing. And as he points out in this article, he said, hey, I thought Obamacare was supposed to reduce our healthcare costs. Of course it wasn't. It was there to make profits for the insurance companies that wrote it. And then, of course, this tweet from Huffington Post, Obamacare just saved the economy from contraction. But then they find out that it's not 1% decline, but it's now a 3% decline. So now they've got to find a cause. Well, guess what? The cause was the weather. It was the winter, you know. It was a very cold winter. And, of course, MarketWatch.com picks up on that. They said the cold weather cost the U.S. economy about $15 billion, maybe. And they're a little bit skeptical because this is a yet another revision. And, of course, there are many other factors. But, of course, Obama jumps in with the weather, but he has a completely different take on it. Okay, he's going to save the economy and save us with global warming measures, okay? He says his initiatives are going to combat global warming and save consumers more than $60 billion in energy costs. This is the Washington Post's take on that. Well, of course, you're going to then pay twice that amount of money. If you really do save it on energy costs, you're going to pay twice that amount of money in carbon taxes to people who are private organizations. It's going to be a kind of indulgence that we will pay them for all the energy that we use. But, of course, the energy prices are not going to go down because they're shutting down power plants everywhere. But you've got the Washington Post, the New York Times, the LA Times pushing that narrative. Stay with us. Joining us this segment is Gerald Celente, famous trends forecaster, publisher of the TrendsJournal. Before I go to Gerald, I want to tell you that we've got some specials of the Alex Jones Show. That's what supports the operation at InfoWarsLife.com. We have Survival Shield X2 and Fluoride Shield, 2 bottles of our best formulas for 30% off. in our Super Detox special for a very limited time while supplies last, or you can get the fluoride out with our Fluoride Shield formula by itself for 25% off at InfoWarsLife.com. And we also, at InfoWarsStore.com, we have a special offer for the ProPure water filters. If you get a ProPure G 2.0 big system, you get a free wire stand, as well as use the promo code WATER to save 10% off of your water filter. So check those out. It helps your health, it helps your family, and it helps to support our operation. Now, joining us, as I just said, is Gerald Celente. His website is TrendsResearch.com. His journal, TrendsJournal, is put out on a quarterly basis. I've got a copy right here on my desk. It's a nice publication. I want to talk to him about a variety of things. I want to talk about economics and his forecast on that, but Gerald is all about the big picture. And in the big picture, of course, war is looming heavy, because that's a major factor that is driving the people who are making the decisions, who are pushing us into war, and he has a lot to say about that. But Gerald, welcome. I wanted to first, before we get into the articles that you've got here, you got one article, Washington is driving the world to the final war. I want to get your comments on that and have you flesh that out for the audience. But before we get to that, I wanted to get your take on this major revision in the economy yesterday from a GDP decline of 1% to all of a sudden tripling it to 3%. And one of the publications pointed out that's the largest decline during expansion since World War II.
Yeah, it's also the greatest revision that's ever been done since 1976.
Yeah.
And so, you know, by the way, the winter up here in the East was terrible. It was one of the worst I ever remember in my life. So there's no question that it hit the markets. Mm-hmm. However, the story's bigger than that, because you keep looking at the numbers. So let's say we even cut it off, you know, we cut it in half. It was still down by, let's say, 1.5%. Now, this is after dumping trillions and trillions and countless trillions into the economy to prop it up. It's not working. There's other numbers that came out today that verify it. And here are some of them. You start looking at consumer spending. Well, it was down. They expected it to increase. It didn't. Now you're also hearing from one of the Fed presidents saying that interest rates may go up as early as the first quarter of 2015. This, David, has been an interest rate recovery, period, paragraph. Not only here, what do they have over there in the European Union? Negative interest rates. You can't make this stuff up. Really? I mean, yeah. If somebody, I'm going up with negative interest, what are you, out of your mind? The only people this is enriching, and the only reason the equity markets are at where they are, is because of interest rates so cheap and all the cheap money. So let's do the numbers. You're looking at merger and acquisition for the first 2 quarters of this year that are almost at the height of just before the crash in 2007. We're looking at $10 billion a day worth of merger and acquisition activity. Now, this is at a time when you're looking again at those numbers that you were talking about. There's no GDP growth. It's negative growth. So what do we have? It's screwing the little people. Because when I was a young man, they used to have this quaint little thing. They were called savings accounts. So people worked hard, put money away, and the money that they put away was way above the inflation rate.
All right.
Now you have your money in the bank. This is what you get back, you know. You get nothing back. So it's hurting everybody across the board. It's setting up a crisis for retirements, and it's also pumping up the housing markets and the equity markets. Again, you look at the numbers. They're all down. Spending is down. Housing isn't that strong, even though we have all this cheap money in there, because first-time home buyers, which usually account for over 40% of home sales, that's now down to around 25%, because young people get lousy jobs. Oh, and by the way, it's going to get worse because of all the consolidation. So you don't have a housing. The housing market recovery is minimal when you put it into the grander context. And again, comparing what housing sales are now compared to what they were back, when the bubble was being inflated. You also, by the way, you have the housing bubble in China has deflated. The only people that don't know it are the people that don't watch it or that believe the guys that get paid a lot of money to go on CNBC and Bloomberg and report the big lies. Because I can tell you firsthand, and it was a trend, one of the top trends we had in the TrendsJournal for 2014, Chinatown boom, they're flooding the area. Mm-hmm. They're buying up properties that they don't even know what they're going to do with. I know this firsthand. And I'm talking about companies coming out of Hong Kong with assets in real estate that are in the 20, 30, and $40 billion range because they're not buying up in the cities anymore because the prices are too high, so they're going out into the outskirts because the bubble has hit already in China. We're going up for a crash that's far worse than the panic of 08. Everything is in place. You look again, as you well reported with these phony numbers that came out, and again, this is coming out from the government, so you know they're even underestimating it. Matter of fact, there's an article today by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. I think it was on your site, having some of the facts there about how the Clinton administration put in these phony numbers, so we're not really looking at the right inflation rate. Mm-hmm. So when you add all this together, the GDP numbers are much worse than what they're putting out.
Well, as you pointed out, we don't have these things called savings accounts anymore because they really don't want Americans to own anything. They want an elite few to own everything, whether it's our cars, our transportation, our homes, our real estate. And as you point out, there's been a panic from the Chinese trying to move their fiat currency into some real hard assets, but that's coming to an end now, isn't it?
Yes, but they're buying up in the States. Mm-hmm. Because they have to put their money someplace, and you have the bubble over there. And again, all things are connected.
That's right.
Because when all else fails, they take you to war.
Yes, and that's the key thing.
Very interesting today.
That's what I want to talk to you about in the long segment. But of course, there's also the economic. One of these articles that we've got up today about the economy on Infowars.com is from Max Slavo, and he's quoting from some economists who said that the inventory drawdowns took down 1.7% from GDP number because companies don't build inventories if they don't have anybody to buy it. And people aren't buying it because they're losing their jobs because they're too expensive, especially at the low end because of healthcare mandates. But it's going to get much worse, Gerald, isn't it? Because we're going to see a lot of people losing their jobs to automation. I was talking about the transportation industry, how they're looking at 3 to 5 years out having self-driving cars. Well, there go the taxi drivers, there go the UPS drivers, there go the long-term truck drivers. They're going to be replaced by metal cans. It's not the Mexicans, it's the metal cans, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and it's even worse than that. There goes your life, too. I mean, really, they can't fix it. You can't get the ignition switch right.
Exactly.
Really, nothing.
Exactly.
How many tens of thousands of millions and millions of automobiles are they recalling? Oh yeah, now we're going to have a perfect one that could drive itself. You know who the cars have been designed by? Geeks and video game freaks. That's all they are.
But what's going to happen?